Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to share our external evaluation with you all. Please put your name and organization in the chat box. We're going to get started with a short video introduction to CEEL, some background information, and then move into our evaluation. After an overview of the evaluation design and findings, we'll move to a panel discussion.
Do you guys want to sing the good morning song?
Yeah. In a CEEL classroom, we actually think that kids should enjoy what they're learning about. They should enjoy coming to school.
CEEL is about rich, rigorous, engaged learning.
For children to learn language, they need to use language.
The numbers are acres. Acres are parts of land.
We want to teach students to be curious and to want to learn and to be responsible for what they're learning.
CEEL stands for the Sobrato Early Academic Language model. Our approach to education is about really centralizing and prioritizing the needs of English learners.
Yes.
In California, 60% of students under the age of 5 speak a language other than English in their homes. And yet, historically, our schools have underserved our English learner population.
La mariquita es roja con puntos negros.
It is truly a new day in California. We have a whole new era of standards. In addition, we have the passage of Prop 58 and now the new English Learner Roadmap.
Humans should protect the earth. They must. They must. Too many dams and poisoning land isn't providing protection.
There is a very different vision, particularly around curriculum, around language and literacy and its relationship to content. Key to that is the notion of integration, and that content knowledge and language development and literacy development all happen in and through and in connection to each other.
Juvenile sea turtle. Once hatchlings leave the nest, they are often not seen again until they return to coastal waters.
The focus of CEEL is language in and through content. Language develops in its most rich way when it's natural and we're using language to learn and to communicate and to access information.
Parents are children's first teachers, and for young children who are in school and in programs for the first time, the connection between home and school becomes very, very important.
Because of dual immersion programs, your children can truly be bilingual, bicultural, biliterate, and keep their home language.
Fue una experiencia muy bonita.
It's a huge shift for educators. It's a shift for the system to notice these students as having an asset in being dual language learners.
Think of all the powerful knowledge you have about the two languages and how many things we were able to talk about.
We understand in CEEL that teachers are core to the solution, that teacher capacity building is essential. We really want teachers to have the capacity of really understanding how to support the language development within the larger learning that's happening in the classroom. The focus of our work is on changing practice in classrooms, in schools, across districts, and across the state.
We're gonna cut this one because the wood is used for solid furniture, so we can make a sentence.
CEEL has changed the impact of how students learn in our classroom, and our English language learners have consistently made significant progress where in the past we haven't.
And now we're going to be studying in English.
It's really embracing a future that's about preparing our kids, not just for career and college readiness, of course, but also for leading and thriving in a global, multilingual 21st century world.
CEEL is really working across all levels to shift the paradigm, to valuing multilingualism and multiculturalism, to have a robust and rich community and society.
You are like superheroes with two languages.
So welcome again. We're thrilled to be here today to share our new external evaluation briefs on CEEL's replication efforts. I'm Anya Hurwitz, the proud executive director of CEEL. We dedicate these briefs and this presentation to Dr. Ruby Takanoishi, whose vision of P3 education and whose deep commitment to our youngest English learners is foundational to CEEL's mission and purpose. Ruby made it very clear that we had a responsibility to tell this story as widely as possible, and we do so in her honor. A bit of background information about CEEL. We are driven by a strong belief that schools should create opportunities for all children to grow and succeed. As such, our mission is to ensure all English learners in California learn, thrive, and lead. In 2008, with the Sobrato family specifically focused on improving outcomes for the youngest English learners in Silicon Valley, the Sobrato Family Foundation partnered with Dr. Lori Olson to design and pilot a new comprehensive approach to learning in preschool and early elementary grades. After strong outcomes from an external evaluation of the CEEL pilot, in 2013, we began replication of the model and have been doing so ever since. In 2019, CEEL became an independent organization with the aim of scaling our impact and engaging new partners in projects and activities that connected educators, families, research advocates, and policy leaders to elevate English learners and promote multilingualism for all students in California. We have replicated significantly over the last 8 years and are now in a diverse set of regions and contexts throughout the state. CEEL is a powerful English learner-focused approach to education, rooted at the intersection of research and educational equity. We believe with our practice work, we lead with our practice work, where we partner with schools over multiple years to train teachers in research-based pedagogy, spark cross-school collaboration, and build internal coaching and leadership capacity to support English learners. We are grounded in research-based practices, and we conduct research in classrooms and schools, publishing insights to advance the field's understanding of what works for English learners. And lastly, we respond to and work to influence the broader policy context. We engage district leaders, educators, and other stakeholders to connect them to opportunities to advocate for policies that centralize the needs of English learners. CEEL is a whole school systems change approach. We work across all levels: teachers, families, coaches, principals, and district leaders to bring joyful, intellectually engaging, culturally and linguistically affirming learning. We focus on professional learning and collaboration. We partner with school and district leaders to align their policies and systems, and we deeply understand that family partnership is essential, particularly for the development of home languages. So with that overview of CEEL, we now turn to the external evaluation. This evaluation was focused on looking at CEEL's replication efforts. This study was conducted by Loyola Marymount University's Center for Equity for English Learners in partnership with Wexford Institute. Data was collected over 4 years between 2015 and 2019. They studied the feasibility of CEEL replication by examining both CEEL implementation and student outcomes. It was both quantitative and qualitative. And here are the questions that guided the study. How has CEEL improved teaching practice? What are the learning outcomes of students participating in CEEL? And to what extent was CEEL implemented across sites? The study included 67 schools across 12 California districts, and schools were spread across 3 cohorts that began implementation in a staggered fashion between the fall of 2013 through the fall of 2015. So now we turn to the findings. CEEL teachers significantly increased their use of research-based practices for teaching English learners. Teachers were more collaborative, enthusiastic about teaching, and confident in their knowledge and skills following the implementation of CEEL. Furthermore, they reported being more effective at engaging families of English learners in their children's learning and making home-to-school connections. CEEL students demonstrated positive outcomes in 4 areas: student engagement, English language development, academic achievement, and biliteracy. Educators observed that students were more joyful, confident, and engaged following the implementation of CEEL. Most English learners started kindergarten with beginning or early intermediate levels of English fluency, and by the 4th grade, most had well-developed English skills or had been reclassified. Also by 4th grade, CEEL Ever English learners, that includes reclassified students or RFEPs, performed as well as or better than their peers in both English language arts and math, despite the fact that CEEL schools have higher concentrations of socioeconomic disadvantaged students. And CEEL students in bilingual programs improved in their home language, Spanish, even as they continue to make progress comparable to statewide averages in other areas. And CEEL can be replicated. According to CEEL district and site leaders, the most important element of implementation and sustainability are alignment with other initiatives, resources that are adequately allocated, intentional planning at both the district and school level, coaches having dedicated time to support teachers, and new teachers are provided professional development. Of course, there were some important lessons learned. There is variability. Implementation does look different in different contexts. Sustainability requires ongoing commitments and work to integrate and build coherence. And sustainability requires ongoing investments, specifically with regards to coaching, time for teacher collaboration, data collection and analysis, and ongoing professional learning. And most importantly, it can be done. We can bring forth comprehensive, robust, equity-minded, deeply research and values-based school improvement efforts across many different contexts, regions, and systems. So before we move to our panel discussion, we would love for you all to engage and make this interactive. Please submit your questions you have for our panelists via the Q&A box. When you ask a question, please include your name, organization, and where you're joining us from so we know who you are. Please also engage in the chat box. Share what's resonating with you and ideas that come to mind. And of course, we would love it if you connect via social media. You can see our handles on this slide. We'll also have a survey at the end, so please fill that out and let us know how we're doing. And now I'm very excited to move to our panel. I have the great honor of introducing two visionary leaders, Lillian Maldonado French, Superintendent of Mountain View School District, and Ray Andre, Assistant Superintendent of Mountain View School District. Mountain View School District is in Los Angeles County, in the city of El Monte, east of the city of Los Angeles. Mountain View began CEEL implementation in 2014, and both Lillian and Ray have been integral to the implementation of CEEL in their district. So,
hello, everyone.
Hello, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to you both. To start off the discussion, please tell us, why did your district adopt CEEL? Share a little about the demographics of your district, specifically with regards to the English learner population, and why you both felt that CEEL was a good match for your district.
Thank you, Anya. It's my pleasure, first of all, to be here with you today and to tell you a little bit about our journey. And I really appreciate speaking to this as a story and having a conversation among colleagues. And I just want to take us back to the time when we began CEEL. It was in 2010 or so. And back then we were in the middle of a deep recession. All right, there was very little funding and absolutely very little for professional development. So several of the El Monte districts around us got together and wrote a grant to the California Community Foundation. And we thought about, well, what are the things that we have in common? And the El Monte area is high English learner and high Latino community. Our district is about 95% Latino and 94% free and reduced lunch. Approximately 60% of our students are English learners. And that was seen pretty much throughout the El Monte districts. And so we thought about the focus was really around the idea of long-term English learners. When we looked at our K-8 districts and then the high school districts and saw how our students were doing going from one segment to another, our English learners were not succeeding. Even those students who were redesignated in some cases early on, what happened to them is they would not maintain their academic achievement and they were failing. So we spent some time processing and looking at the idea of English learners and how each of our districts would come up with a solution that would best fit our needs. I'll let Ray talk a little bit about what he saw, because at the time he was a principal of one of our intermediate schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think what stood out the most, I was new to the district and I worked at a junior high school that was K-8 or 7-8. And most of the students who came to us were long-term English learners. Very few of our students were meeting their targets of learning English and making proficiency at the time, the CEEL, which was being administered in California. And there was a lot of frustration amongst our staff because instruction was largely skills-based and students were coming in with a lack of content knowledge. And so especially science and social studies teachers, they saw gaps there, not only there, but they also in literacy. Students weren't able to access grade level text. They were used to doing assignments in isolation many times. And we were starting to move towards a collaborative culture ourselves in the middle school. And what we saw is students not necessarily having those skills having been practiced early on, because as we know, the standards back then in general were just very skills based.
So what we did was think about the needs of those students, but really try to get more to root level causes. And looking at what the needs of our district, it was really about developing a program that not only would maybe intervene or ameliorate the situation, but prevent the situation. So it was really a prevention of long-term English learners. And we focused on how can we provide the very best first instruction, beginning with our Head Start preschool students all the way up through third grade. And doing research and looking at what we were focusing on, we came upon CEEL. And I like to share that when we first saw a video very similar to the one you showed, it brought tears to our eyes, because it wasn't about English learners per se. It was about great instruction that all children deserve. And so we went about creating a pilot program with 3 schools, and then decided to do things a little differently and say, this is what we want for all students. And so we embarked on a district-wide implementation, grade level at a time. A little bit different than other districts, but we felt that that was the best for us. And luckily for us, that's right when LCAP, which is a special state funding, and came into play for our state. And so we were able to really implement the program with the kind of coaches, materials, and extra planning time that was really necessary to have a robust implementation.
Thank you so much. So will you tell us a little bit more about how CEEL influenced teaching and learning in Mountain View?
Sure. I think one of the main things you see, and as you saw the enthusiasm on the video of the teachers speaking together, imagine a whole school full of enthusiastic teachers coming together, collaborating, looking at data, and feeling that they have resources and materials in order to do what they need to do. I think the enthusiasm and the sense of direction is one of the main focus for our teachers. And a sense also that this isn't about negating the good work that they've already been doing, because it incorporated a lot of the work that we had already begun through strategies such as GLAD, if you're familiar with those strategies. But what we like to say is that it's really about taking the very, very best of those practices out there and packaging them together in a way that is coherent and makes sense for teachers, and also incorporates their content. because really it's the academic language that makes all the difference for our students. Ray, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think a comment a very veteran teacher told me after the first year of training is she said, I never thought we'd get to go back to teaching anywhere near like this again. You went to their classrooms and they were happy about what they were doing, and that was being transmitted to the students, not only because of the fact that there was joy back in the classroom, but they were working with thematic units and collaborating with their grade level peers and across schools across the district. And we were really building in those structures. Not only did they have planning time at their school site, but we wanted them to continue planning across the district. Teachers had the opportunity to embed social emotional learning standards into their units. And more importantly, they were teaching content. We were coming off the era of language arts nearly all day. And students didn't have that. And where teachers really commented that they saw that is that students had something to write about. When kids would sit down to write prior, they try to brainstorm, what do I write about? But kids had in-depth knowledge. We had second graders talking about the Environmental Protection Agency. And when do you hear that with kids, and especially English learners? And they had the strategies and resources alive in their classroom, where if they were writing, they could go and recall information on a strategy they used in the classroom, or they could talk to a peer. The one thing that I noticed probably the most is you can walk into a classroom when the teacher and students were not there, and you immediately made connections by what was in the room that was produced by the teacher and by the students, and you knew what learning was going on.
I'd like to mention two things. One was teacher expectations of what students and especially English learners were capable of learning changed drastically. We had students using scientific language for terminology, for insects and for flowers, and for different things they were learning in science. They were able to really express themselves. And what happened is the teachers realized that the type of lessons they were previously focusing on were not engaging enough and not high level enough to really spark that kind of learning that was really important. And the other thing was we focused on making sure, and I think CEEL is one of the unique programs that it's designed for preschool through third grade. So our Head Start and preschool teachers learned right alongside our kindergarten and first grade teachers. And it really raised the level of professionalism as to how they felt about the work they were doing. And there's a very strong alignment now with our Head Start and preschool programs with our K-8 program. And so that was wonderful. One of the best things, best activities is Summer Bridge, where our preschool and kindergarten teachers teach together in a classroom. It really raised their confidence level and their level of their sense of professionalism and how they saw themselves as valued members of our teaching community.
Thank you, Lillian, for sharing that. I think that's such an important element right now as we think of TK expansion, and we really think of this notion of actual universal preschool, which is closer than it's ever been. And what are the ways that we're going to do this kind of alignment work, right, across our early learning and K system? Would you talk a little bit about ELD, English Language Development, and how that changed as you began implementing the model?
Sure. You want to go ahead, Ray?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think a lot of the ELD programs coming up were disjointed and disconnected what students are learning throughout their day. Because the environment of just the regular day was so language rich, it was print rich, it was very meaningful and connected. Our ELD program transitioned from being where we pull kids, a lot of us platoon kids, and we mix students for ELD by their proficiency levels, but there was common language and common learning that was happening across our classrooms that teachers were able to tap into and expand and truly provide designated ELD lessons that students would then take those skills and they were easily transferable back into their classroom, and they could practice and use those strategies. And there was common sentence frames being used in content instruction that were being used in designated ELD. So instead of having students who are searching for connections, like how do I use this language in my learning, it was very easy for students to make those connections and then expand it and build upon what they learned in their designated ELD time.
Thank you. And then I'd love to hear you guys talk a little bit about how your bilingual program transformed and kind of where it is today as well, and how it's growing your dual language.
One of the most exciting things about CEEL has been the reblossoming, I would say, of our bilingual program. Mountain View at one time was known for their bilingual programs, and unfortunately, through programs that came in, federal programs such as Reading First and different models at the state level, that slowly went by the wayside. When I became a superintendent in 2009, there was only one school truly that had an early exit program. And what's so exciting is to see how that school has blossomed and turned into a dual immersion program that's now K-8. So just to the sense of, so those teachers, luckily for us, we had them in place, but now they were able to refresh and really focus on their dual language and the sense of the importance of biliteracy in our district. And now we have a second school that has begun a dual immersion program, and we're on the cusp of beginning a dual immersion program in Mandarin. So all exciting things to come in the future for our dual immersion program.
Wonderful. And, we say in CEEL a lot, we talk about this joyful learning. I'd love to hear you all share a little bit about what that means for you.
I'll go first. It was a joy to just walk back into other people's classrooms. I remember the end of the first year when we just started our initial launch of CEEL, that first year of training, and they did the parent unit culmination event. And we walked in and you saw kids holding their parents' hands, taking them around their classroom and explaining to them, not just this is the work I did, but this is my piece of the work. This is what it means. And this is what I've learned. And I haven't seen that, I've only been in education for 24 years, but in the timeline that I've started, I hadn't seen that much in-depth knowledge by second graders or even first graders. Not only have they developed language skills, I'm going to put it very simply, they knew stuff and they wanted to walk you around the room, whether you were their parent or somebody else, and they were going to tell you what they knew and understood. And it was really just amazing. Additionally, our teachers, just to be able to stand back and have their students take others around their room and express their joy and express what they knew to others, you just saw them standing back and how proud they were of their students. And I think it made a huge difference, not only in learning, but people's desire to want to teach.
And it's interesting to see how that has spread to other grade levels, whether or not they were in the CEEL program, to have a classroom ambassador, a student who comes up to you and walks you around the classroom and shows you what's going on. It has really made such a huge difference in the joy that we see in classrooms every day. And when I'm making formal visits with our school board, they have noted the difference. And these are board members who were around prior to CEEL, and so they know immediately when they walk into a classroom and if they see a CEEL classroom, they know it when they see it. It's wonderful.
I think you both are underscoring this importance that we make around the relationship between joy and intellectual engagement and rigor, right? And that there's a relationship between the two, and it looks different for 3- and 4-year-olds, but there's still a real alignment and connection across the grade levels to that deep intellectual engagement. So
and I have to add to that, just the family literacy programs that we've done connected to CEEL have blossomed and grown. Families love being able to share their culture, their own language. And what's been interesting is that in addition to that, we've done Saturday language academies where children get to choose different languages. And it's so fun to see a multitude of students in different language learning Mandarin, learning Spanish, learning a variety. So it really has created a renaissance in language learning in our district.
Thank you. I want to turn us now to our current context, that of this ongoing pandemic. We know our English learner students, our immigrant families and communities have been and continue to be disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. We also know that though it's critical to be clear-eyed and very honest with ourselves and our leaders and teachers about the growing opportunity gaps, we must also be rooted in our research base and our values and commitment to asset-based approaches that are culturally and linguistically affirming and honor the funds of knowledge of students and families. We know that children need differentiated approaches and targeted interventions, and that school must be engaging, thematic, content-rich, supportive, safe, and joyful, now more than ever. So please tell us, how did CEEL help you support your students, especially your English learners, in distance learning, and now that we're in pandemic recovery?
So I know you've heard this comment before, but you know, people say we're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. I don't think so. We were all in the same storm, in the same ocean. We were all in different boats. And so one of the first things is looking at making sure our students had devices and internet and all the things that made learning possible. What was wonderful about CEEL is that we had tremendous coaches and TOSAs who were able to quickly work together and create, basically develop our CEEL units into a digital platform. Ray, do you want to talk about their work?
So, you know, of course, this was supposed to have been 2 weeks and we're all going to be back to normal. So after that 2-week period, we realized that this may not be what we thought it was. Our TOSAs, our CEEL TOSAs, especially, and we had an embedded CEEL trainer in our district we're very lucky to have. And they went to work with putting together, here's how you modify the instructional units. And they started daily PD. We carved out 45-minute sessions within the day because we're on a modified schedule, of course. And every day they were presenting PD for teachers who were first interested, and we had very good turnout. And they did things such as taking the drawn label. How do you make that a digital strategy so that your students can continue the learning that they were doing in their classroom? Sentence patterning charts. They took that and we started thinking, well, how do they deliver that instruction through Google Classroom? What if they're using Seesaw? And because people are using so many different things, they went to work on trying to replicate what was happening in person into a digital environment. And, you know, taking those things that were really important from their CEEL training, like how do you hear a student's voice when there's other students online? It was a little chaotic in the beginning. And they were finding resources where students could record themselves saying chants at home, reading sentences, express it using vocabulary, and teachers were providing feedback through those programs. And this all happened early April. And because we had our CEEL TOSAs in place and our other TOSAs in place, we were able to transition very quickly into a different type of learning. I'm not saying it was easy. And, you know, we've grown every day since then, but we had the people in place who were highly trained, who knew what, one, we valued in the district, and two, the type of learning that our students needed. Also, we had teachers who had common units already based with certain foundational principles that they had bought into and believed in and were using in their classrooms, and they were eager to continue that work with students while they're at home.
And given how critical family engagement has been and is within a pandemic context, how has CEEL influenced family engagement with regards to the pandemic?
So that was the interesting part. As I mentioned, we started out with just getting devices and connectivity as a focus. And sometimes that meant going to them. Sometimes they meant you would see a grandma with 7 little ones coming to a school and you know, setting up tables outdoors to be able to just to show them how to log in. It really was eye-opening and important for us to know, you know, exactly their challenges that they faced. What was so exciting to us is to see how our families quickly grew and developed and realized that they needed to have more foundational skills in technology. And from that, our family engagement program really went digital. So the kinds of training and family supports that existed before went to Zoom, went to webinars, went to different things, and then really focused on providing training for our families in technology and how to download documents, how to upload assignments, how to do all those things that, you know, might seem that students knew how to do, but not the parents. And that has grown into continuing technology focus for our families as well. That's been a very, very exciting and outgrowth from the pandemic, and one of the positive focuses, I have to say. Ray, do you want to mention, before we go on, a little bit about the growth that we have seen? Because in addition to some of that, we have actual data that focuses on our I'm sorry, what's the word? Reclassification, sorry, thank you.
So our 3 pilot schools that we started this with, by the end of the 3 years of training, they had increased by 2% in their reclassification. In addition, we chose schools that were some of our furthest behind in terms of current student performance data. And in some key areas of literacy, word recognition, oral vocabulary, knowing high frequency words for our TK through 3rd grade students, we saw over 2 years growth on average in these key indicators. So the goal of selecting these schools is partially so they can at least catch up to the rest of our schools. And within 3 years, they were right there with them in key literacy and language areas that without CEEL, I don't think we would have seen that progress because it wasn't happening prior. The other thing I think in terms of family engagement is because there were gallery walks with families, families had a better idea of what learning was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And as difficult as it was, they knew the expectation and what students were doing in the classroom. And that was very important as they became home teachers.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I see a chat from one of your amazing coaches talking about the parents being in the virtual classroom with the students and really how transformational that was to have parents actually in the classroom as well.
I'd like to acknowledge Lily Rubalcaba, who's not only one of our coaches, she's actually a CEEL trainer. And so she's really been instrumental in making our program successful.
And now that you all are coming, or we all are coming back into quote unquote, you know, the new world, which is pandemic recovery, but it also just feels like more and more pandemic. What are the ways that you find CEEL helping support this new context and this ongoing context? And Ray, you talked about this integration of socio-emotional learning, of content, of language development, both integrated and designated. So I'm just curious, how is some of that playing out now, given this ongoing pandemic context?
I think there's a few key indicators for me. We've had a lot of movement of staff simply because as the state is going through declining enrollment, people are changing grade levels. And so the first worry I had was that are people CEEL trained and can we catch them up? But another indicator is that as all these people were moving, they were asking for their CEEL units, make sure they get delivered to me. So it's one of those little moments where you realize that people are coming back and they're still valuing those things. They want to do those things for students. The other, probably the most telling thing that I see is in their classrooms is even when we came back and students were behind plexiglass and separated and, at the time, you were still seeing chants happening in the classroom. You were still seeing those strategies being used. And I think not only did it give, we're all looking for a sense of normalcy, and sometimes we're reaching back to what was because that's what we valued and cherished, but people are taking those strategies and they're still using them and they know how important language is. Also, those strategies give children a chance to connect. Even though they're academic strategies, they are very well aligned to social emotional standards and expectations and strategies used with children, because it's about collaboration and communication and learning with each other, not sitting behind a computer screen or sitting independently at a desk. The other thing I think coming back to in-person instruction that I've noticed is that all those videos and different things that were produced during the pandemic, interactive read alouds that were being done and other strategies, they're still being used by our families. They still ask for them because they saw the value in them. And if I didn't have that knowledge of how to do that at home, the strategy is being demonstrated, and it's increased their level of support for their children, even out while doing homework. And Lillian mentioned the family programs we have. We have a family biliteracy program where we adopted that, literature needs to be in both language, no matter what language that is. And we use those strategies to engage our families so that they can continue the work at home. And it's not just a matter of here's a one-day workshop. It's a 10-week commitment. And it's mom and dad or grandma or grandpa, whoever the adult is in the home with their children, they're all sitting there learning together as a family. And it really, it's created a foundation in the district that this is what we do and this is what we do with our families. And you see that coming back to in-person instruction.
I'd like to add that one of the key strategies we implemented was a digital library, and that is still being used, and it's absolutely being used by families to read aloud together. So that's a wonderful strategy.
It's really inspiring to hear these stories of really applying some of the things we learned and we deepened in the pandemic, really finding the way to keep them going and evolve them as we continue to move through this time. I think one of our concerns is that last year, there was such a sense of urgency around partnering with families in the way that we did, that now that teachers have children in classrooms all day with them, will they have enough time? Will they have enough capacity to do that kind of family partnership? And so clearly, if there's a commitment from all the way throughout the district, right, there are ways to do that. But there has to be that vision, there has to be the skills within the system, there has to be the tools and the resources and definitely the alignment. So it is really inspiring to hear. I want to share a quote, and then we're going to move on to our Q&A. We have lots of questions and coming in from our audience, but I'd like to share a quote that I think really speaks to this and speaks to a lot of what you have been sharing about. Really, what does it mean to connect school and with the communities that we serve? What does it mean to really ensure that those connections are clear? This is a quote from Zaretta Hammond from a recent AFT article. It says, "Our counter narrative to learning loss begins with reframing this period as a time of family and community-based learning. Children learn something. We need to welcome this off-topic knowledge back into the classroom as an asset. If we don't, we send a dangerous message to students that real learning only happens in school. That message robs diverse students of the chance to recognize their own agency as learners. In contrast, our counter-narrative embraces the notion of redesigning teaching and learning for liberatory education. So with that, we'll now turn to our participant questions. So this is a question for Mountain View. Daniela from Bellwether Education says, so inspiring to hear about these joyful classrooms. I'm wondering what went well, what work went into getting teacher buy-in? Any obstacles to note?
There was no problem with that at all. One of the first things we did is we took a group of interested teachers and who I thought might be influential teachers to a visit up north to one of the implementation schools in Northern California, Redwood City. And to get people excited and thinking about, even this was our union leadership and prior to ever making the decision, but having them be part of the process. And the benefit of that is nothing like seeing it in person and having a sense. And I think that was really an important part because these were influential teachers and not all were necessarily people who one would think would be on board. But I think it's important to have all voices heard from the beginning and making sure that we're listening. The other part is, I think, is not to sugarcoat that this is an easy thing to do. This is a lot of work and it's hard work. And teachers need to be acknowledged and compensated and given the resources and tools that they need to make this successful. And I think that when you treat people professionally, that makes a big difference. And so while they do over and above out of the goodness of their heart, you know, listening to them and saying, you know what, I really don't want to be subbed out for the day. I would prefer to come in on a Saturday morning and work on a make and take. Then we do Saturday mornings and we compensate people. Or, you know, I'd rather do maybe from 4 to 8 and do some sort of mini session on the extra kind of planning. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Ray?
No, I think listening to them, you know, implementing CEEL is about believing in teachers and that the work that they do is valuable and meaningful. So when you're going through the process, if teachers say they need something, you need to find a way to provide that resource, you know, additional books, materials. You know, it's also leveraging our LCAP, as Lillian mentioned earlier. We built in collaborative release time for our teachers at the elementary level so that they could plan, because it is a lot of work. And to try and negate those statements from people would have just undermined the work that was trying to be done. And also, you know, honoring them as professional, that if this does take time, then our job is to figure out how can we build that time into the day and not expecting them to be on their dining room table night after night, creating strategies.
And I think the collaborative sense of it is also very important. It builds a camaraderie, it builds a sense of working together towards a common work, and it also lessens the load if someone's taking a little piece of the unit and making it for everyone.
And you know, having walked through your classrooms many times, you also know that what one teacher is doing in one classroom, or what one set of students are receiving and learning and engaging in, is aligned with what's happening in another classroom. And so that sense of alignment and coherence across grade levels and within grade levels, I think, is really powerful. And when, again, the leadership is on board, the teachers are on board, the conversation is happening, the partnership with family is all there, you see that level of implementation. And that question of, did they get the good teacher or not, is not even on the table anymore.
Right. It creates a sense of equity and democratizes, really. So there's no such thing as lucky students. Every student should be a lucky student.
So what are some of the barriers to implementation and to sustainability?
Well, I think one of the things we mentioned is financial. I think you have to think about a sustainability as a plan, not as a hope. And so you have to plan ahead for the kind of sustainability and not assume it's only while the professional development is taking place, but that sustainability means there has to be funding every year to make sure that this kind of training and support is offered to new folks. And then as people need additional materials or additional resources, that the funding is there for them. Ray, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I agree. It's first of all, the professional development occurs over several years. So you have to commit to, even when people are possibly changing grade levels, because there's some factors that you just can't, keep in place, prevent from happening. But you have to have a plan for either catching them up or possibly transitioning them to a new cohort or providing extra release time, throughout the year so that people feel a sense of they're being supported in it. The other thing I think that's very important is, as we're coming back, thinking about like, when do you need to possibly relaunch, if needed, and not just assuming that because you did this training 3 years ago, it's going to sustain itself on its own, and making sure that your site administrators know the commitment. We have several new administrators in our district in the last 2 years. So we're already planning, how do we do a mini relaunch for administrators so that they know how to support the teachers at their school sites, and they're not coming in possibly with other ideas because they're not aware of how important this is to us as a district.
And we do participate with all the CEEL engagement for principals. And I think that's a very important part of this, principals coming together and job-alike folks coming together and talking about what are the implementation challenges and how can we overcome those barriers.
So one of our questions are, to keep probing here, if you were to do it again, what would you do differently?
I don't know, not have a recession. And that would be nice.
Have an issue getting subs.
Yeah, I think one of the nice things for us is it is implemented over time, and so it's a 2-year process to go through all the modules, and it's interesting. Teachers are it's a process, and they're learning. Wow, I wish I had that. At first they say, I wish I had this unit earlier. But then later on, they say, now I understand why we didn't have that unit earlier. We really needed the time to implement and to slowly focus on the different learning. So I think that was important.
Yeah, I'm seeing a chat from Dr. Lori Olson, who's in the participant pool. Welcome, Lori, about that extended experience, right? It's a sustained learning experience with lots of support structures put in place, where teachers really are getting the kind of capacity building from each other, from the coaching, from the collaboration time, from the modeling that our trainers do, but then the coaches do of the materials. So it really is this whole systems approach, not just about some trainings or about some curriculum that was purchased, right?
Right. I think the coaches are the key. And one of the things we did is not force coaches on people, but teachers had to invite the coach in. And so that created a sense of trust and really a focus on what is it that we're going to be working on together. So I would say that's a very important part of this program.
And I'm not sure if they're wrong or not, but our coaches were very committed and they did an amazing job. And And the coaches that we had, their first intention was to provide support to teachers, not to, you're doing this strategy right, or, you should be doing better this way. But what are those supports that they could put in place, whether it was, I'll make the strategy for you, or I'll go in and model. Their hearts were in the right place. And I think that speaks volumes to not only who they are, but their commitment, because of their belief in CEEL as well.
Absolutely, rock stars. There's a question also about whether or not CEEL is appropriate, an appropriate model for districts or schools with lower numbers of English learners. I will share that I think, as was already explained, Mountain View does have pretty high concentrations of English learners across all the schools. We have ended up implementing CEEL in some schools with lower numbers, closer to 30 or 40%. And the reason that has happened is because a wave of higher concentrations, so Title I schools or schools with higher numbers, started CEEL implementation in a district. And this is not, I'm not referring to Mountain View at this moment. And then other waves were added on because the district decided to do CEEL district-wide. And they realized that they had many English learners spread across those other schools when compared to just the high concentrations. I will say that, yes, CEEL is appropriate. As I think has been described here, CEEL, the biggest influence is on the teaching that happens all day, every day. And that integration, that deep integration of language with content. And that supports all student learning. But that's very different than saying all good instruction is all good instruction. Teachers really need to gain the real deep linguistic understanding. I mean, high levels of language understanding, and that requires a certain level of commitment. And as you can see, and you hear these folks talk about, they've been at this for years. And so that means that the culture and the sense of urgency and the sense of need for, really addressing equity has to be centralized and prioritized. And so though the model will absolutely support all student learning, there is a certain amount of really understanding the context and whether or not the schools have the will and the commitment to stay at it for multiple years, to invest in the sustainability, et cetera. As an organization, we prioritize districts and schools with high numbers of English learners, both because we want to have the highest impact possible and because we understand that those are the places that cannot afford to do something different, right? If they have the level of leadership, the level of commitment and support for teachers and building this robust system, and the numbers and the student and community match, then we know we're set up for success. So hopefully that answers your question. We're really right at time. And so we want to really thank you. I'm going to do my screen share one more time. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll learn more about us. Please like and follow us on our social media. Sign up for our newsletter at CEEL.org. And please tell us how we did. Please complete the evaluation form, which is being shared in the chat box right now. Thank you, Lillian and Ray, so much for sharing your powerful stories and experiences. Thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to connecting in the future.